The heat in Redemption didn't forgive. It hung over the town like a wool blanket soaked in kerosene, thick and oppressive, turning the air into something you had to chew before breathing. Dust coated everything. The wooden storefronts, the hitching posts, the faces of men who'd long stopped caring what they looked like. This far-out vanity died quick. Survival took precedence. Survival. Colt Mercer's forge sat at the east end of Main Street, a squat brick building with a tin roof that pinged and groaned under the afternoon sun. Inside, it was hotter, deliberately, necessarily so. The furnace roared like a caged animal, spitting embers that danced across the dirt floor before winking out. Colt worked stripped to the waist, sweat carving rivers through the soot on his chest, his hammer striking hot steel in a rhythm he could maintain for hours without thinking. 26 years old, and already he moved like a man twice that age. Economical, efficient, no wasted motion. His father had taught him the trade before dying young, leaving Colt with the forge, a mortgage he'd never quite clear, and a reputation for fixing guns other smiths called hopeless. He was working on a seized revolver cylinder when the door opened. The heat of the day pushed in first, followed by the man. Colt didn't look up immediately. Customers learned quick that interrupting him mid-strike was a good way to get ignored, but something about the silence made him pause. The hammer hovered. He glanced toward the entrance. The stranger stood just inside the threshold, backlit by the glare outside, his features obscured. He was tall, taller than average, but it wasn't his height that caught Colt's attention. It was the stillness. The man didn't fidget, didn't shift his weight, didn't do any of the small unconscious things people do when entering an unfamiliar space. He just stood there, perfectly motionless, like he'd been carved from the same wood as the doorframe. "Help you?" Colt's voice came out rougher than intended, scratched raw by smoke and heat. The stranger stepped forward into the dim light of the forge. Colt got his first real look. 50s, maybe early 60s? Hard to tell. The man's face had the kind of weathering that came from decades under an unforgiving sun. Deep lines bracketed his mouth and fanned from the corners of his eyes. His hair was steel gray, cropped close to the skull. He wore canvas trousers gone pale with age, and a shirt that had once been blue but had faded to something closer to ash. Everything about him spoke of function over form, worn down to bare necessity. But it was his eyes that held Colt. Pale, almost colorless, the washed-out gray of a sky before a storm. They moved across the forge with practiced efficiency, cataloging exits, tools, angles. Military assessment. Automatic. The stranger carried a rifle. He held it in one hand, casual as a walking stick, the barrel pointed at the floor. Even from across the room, Colt could see it was old. Not antique old, just dead. The wood stock had cracked and grayed, the metal pitted with rust that looked like mange on a dog. "Need it looked at," the stranger said. His voice matched his appearance, low, level, stripped of accent or inflection, the kind of voice that didn't draw attention, didn't linger in memory. Colt set down his hammer and wiped his hands on a rag that didn't clean them. "Looked at or buried?" "Fixed." "That thing's past fixing." "Take a look anyway." There was no hostility in the words, no challenge, just certainty. Colt found himself bristling at the assumption he'd comply simply because the man expected it. But curiosity won out. It usually did. He crossed the forge, boots scuffing through coal dust, and took the rifle. It was lighter than it should have been. The wood had dried out, gone brittle. The metal felt fragile under his fingers, like it might flake apart at rough handling. He turned it over, squinting at the mechanism. Springfield Model 1873. Standard issue cavalry rifle, nicknamed the Trapdoor for its breech-loading action. Outdated by 40 years, forgotten by 50. "Where'd you get this?" "Carried it a long time." Colt glanced up. The stranger's expression hadn't changed, flat, neutral, offering nothing. "This hasn't been fired in decades." "No." Wood's cracked in 3 places. Trigger assemblies seized. The barrel's got more rust than a sunken ship. Colt tested the action. It didn't budge. "Even if I could get it working, it'd probably blow up in your hands first shot. Can you fix it or not?" Colt opened his mouth to say no, to hand the worthless piece of junk back and get on with actual work. Then he saw the serial number. It was stamped into the receiver, barely visible under the corrosion. Most of it had been eaten away by time and neglect, but enough remained to make out the pattern. Except it wasn't standard. Springfield's serial numbers followed a specific format. Colt had restored enough military surplus to recognize the sequence. This one didn't match. The prefix was wrong. The digits were too long. And there, faint but unmistakable, was a letter sequence he'd never seen on any Springfield, TC7. His pulse kicked up a notch. Where did you really get this? The stranger's eyes hadn't moved. Does it matter? This serial number I know what it says. TC7 isn't standard issue. This was never sold to civilians. This was... Colt stopped, his mind catching up to his mouth. TC7. He'd seen that designation exactly once before, in a military procurement catalog his father had kept. A catalog that wasn't supposed to exist, full of weapons assigned to units that weren't officially recognized. Covert operations. Black budget. Off the books. This belonged to a ghost company, Colt said quietly. The stranger's expression flickered, just a fraction, just for a heartbeat. Not surprise. Recognition. Like Colt had finally said something worth acknowledging. "What's your name?" the stranger asked. "Colt Mercer." Mercer? The name seemed to register, settling into the stranger's features like dust into a groove. "You related to William Mercer?" Colt's chest tightened. "He was my father." "You knew him?" "No." The answer came too quick, too definite. "How much to fix the rifle?" "I don't... Look, I can't just..." The door banged open. 3 men strode in, moving with the kind of coordinated purpose that said they'd done this before. They wore civilian clothes, shirts with rolled sleeves, vests, trousers, but they carried themselves like soldiers. 2 took flanking positions by the windows. The third, broad-shouldered with a thick mustache and eyes like hammered iron, walked straight toward Colt. He held up a leather badge case. "Federal Agent Marcus Devlin, Department of Military Affairs. We're here for the weapon." Colt's mind stuttered. "What?" "The rifle in your hands. Hand it over. Now." "This is my shop. You can't just..." "We can and we are." Devlin's hand drifted toward the revolver holstered at his hip. Not a draw, just a reminder. "This is a matter of national security. That weapon is classified government property. Surrender it immediately." Colt's grip tightened on the Springfield. His gaze cut to the stranger, who stood exactly where he'd been before, hands loose at his sides, expression unchanged. "This is your rifle," Colt said. The stranger nodded once. "Fractional." "You knew they'd come." Another nod. "Then why?" "Because," the stranger interrupted, his voice still level, still calm, "someone needs to see it before they bury it again." Devlin's patience snapped. He drew his revolver, leveling it at Colt's chest. "Drop the rifle. Step away. Last warning." Colt's heart hammered against his ribs. His hands felt numb. The forge suddenly seemed too small, the walls pressing in, the heat suffocating. He'd restored hundreds of weapons, fixed them, cleaned them, sent them back into the world. None of them had ever been worth dying over. He set the rifle on his workbench. Devlin gestured sharply. One of the other agents moved forward, snatching the Springfield with gloved hands like it might bite. He wrapped it in an oilcloth, securing it with practiced efficiency. "You're making a mistake," the stranger said. Devlin turned to him. "Elias Vorn, we've been looking for you a long time." "Not hard enough. Doesn't matter now. You're under arrest for theft of military property, unauthorized possession of classified materiel, and..." Devlin paused, something cold sliding into his expression. "Desertion." Colt's breath caught. Desertion. The word landed heavy, weighted with implications. Vorn didn't react, didn't argue, didn't protest, didn't move. He just stood there, watching Devlin with those pale, unreadable eyes. "Hands behind your back," Devlin ordered. Vorn complied, slowly, deliberately. One of the agents moved in with iron manacles, snapping them around Vorn's wrists with practiced efficiency. The metal clicked shut with a finality that made Colt's stomach turn. Devlin stepped closer to Colt. "You breathe a word of this to anyone, and you'll find yourself in irons too. Understand?" Colt nodded. His voice had abandoned him. "Good." Devlin turned toward the door, gesturing to his men. "Move him out." They hauled Vorn toward the exit. He went without resistance, his gait steady despite the chains. As he passed Colt, his gaze cut sideways, just for a second, just long enough. And in that glance, Colt saw something that made his skin crawl. Not fear, not defeat, expectation. Like this was all going exactly as Vorn had planned. Then he was gone, swallowed by the glare of the afternoon sun. The forge fell silent except for the hiss of the furnace and the thunder of Colt's pulse in his ears. He stood there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway. Then he grabbed his coat and followed them. Ishaw. The federal building sat on the north edge of town, a squat two-story structure built from limestone that sweated in the heat. Colt watched from across the street, tucked into the shade of an overhang, as Devlin and his men hauled Vorn inside. They moved with efficiency born of routine, no drama, no spectacle. Just another arrest, another criminal off the streets. Except Vorn wasn't resisting, and Devlin's jaw was clenched so tight Colt could see the muscle jumping from 50 feet away. Something was wrong. Not with the arrest, with the context, with the why. Colt had grown up around soldiers his father had served before taking up the forge, and plenty of veterans passed through redemption looking for work, drink, or just a place to forget. Colt knew the difference between a deserter on the run and a man who'd made peace with his choices. Vorn was the latter, which meant, "You planning to stand there all day, or are you coming in?" Colt jerked around. A woman leaned against the wall beside him, one boot propped against the brick, arms crossed. Mid-30s, maybe, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that could strip paint at 10 paces. She wore a simple dress, practical rather than fashionable, and a gun belt that looked worn from use rather than show. "Who are you?" Colt asked. Colton. "May Sutton, Marshal, Northern Territory." She pushed off the wall, rolling her shoulders like she'd been standing there a while. "Saw you follow Devlin's boys from your shop. Subtle. You're not." "I wasn't trying to hide." "Good. Means you're not completely stupid." She studied him with the kind of assessment Colt imagined she used on criminals. "What's your interest in Vorn?" "He came to my forge. Wanted a rifle fixed." "The Springfield." Colt blinked. "How do you—" "I've been tracking that weapon for 6 months. Lost the trail in Colorado, picked it up again in Arizona, and finally traced it here." May's expression hardened. "Difference is, Devlin's boys got to him first." "Why do you want the rifle?" "Same reason they do, evidence." "Of what?" May's gaze drifted toward the federal building. Her jaw worked like she was chewing on words she didn't want to say. Finally, "You ever heard of Stonefall?" The name meant nothing to Colt. He shook his head. "Figured," May sighed. "Settlement about 200 miles north of here. Founded in the 60s by families looking to make something out of nothing. Farms, livestock, a church. About 300 people at its peak." She paused. "In October of 1894, every single one of them disappeared." Colt frowned. "Disappeared how?" "That's the question. Official report said Comanche raid. Blamed it on renegades who'd broken from the reservation, painted it as a tragedy, and moved on. But the thing is," May's eyes cut back to him, sharp and cold. "There were no bodies, no survivors, no witnesses, just empty houses and bloodstains so faint you could barely see them." "Could have been a raid." "Could have been, except the Comanche said it wasn't them. And when my father, who was marshal back then, tried to investigate, he got shut down by federal order, told to leave it alone, told it was classified." May's voice dropped, bitter and tight. "He didn't leave it alone. Spent the next 10 years digging, and right before he died, he told me 3 things. Stonefall wasn't raided. It was erased. The people responsible were military, and the proof was buried with a rifle that didn't officially exist." Colt's throat went dry. "TC-7. May's expression sharpened. "You saw the serial number?" "Yeah." "Then you understand why Devlin wants that rifle in a furnace. It's the only physical evidence tying the military to Stonefall. Without it, there's no case, no investigation, just old rumors and a marshal's obsession." "What about Vorn?" "He was there." May said it flat, certain. "He was part of whatever happened. And now he's back, carrying the one thing that could blow the whole cover-up wide open." She tilted her head. "Question is, why?" Colt thought about Vorn's eyes, the expectation in them. He wants it exposed, Colt said slowly. Maybe. Or maybe he's playing a deeper game. May pushed away from the wall. Either way, Devlin's going to make him disappear. Officially, quietly. And that rifle's going to vanish right along with him. So what do we do? May raised an eyebrow. We? He came to my forge for a reason. You said it yourself. I saw the rifle. I'm already involved. Involved gets you killed, kid. Devlin's not some corrupt sheriff you can outshoot in the street. He's got federal authority, unlimited resources, and orders from people who don't leave loose ends. May's gaze hardened. You want my advice? Go home. Forget this. Live your life. And if I don't? She studied him for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, then you better be ready to burn everything you know to the ground. Because once you step into this, there's no stepping out. Colt thought about his father, about the procurement catalog hidden in the forge's back office, the one William Mercer had kept locked away like a secret too dangerous to share, about the look on Vaughn's face as they led him away, calm, assured, like he'd been waiting 30 years for this exact moment. I'm in, Colt said. May sighed. Course you are. She jerked her head toward the federal building. Then let's see if we can get inside before they ship him off to a black site. But, Getting inside turned out to be easier than Colt expected. May had credentials, real ones, complete with a badge and papers signed by territorial officials. She played it straight, walked up to the front desk, and announced she had jurisdiction over any prisoners brought through redemption until federal transfer was finalized. The clerk, a nervous kid who looked fresh out of school, didn't argue. He just handed over keys and pointed them toward the holding cells in the basement. That actually worked, Colt muttered as they descended the stairs. Devlin rushed this. He's trying to move fast, which means he's cutting corners. May's hand rested on her revolver. Won't last. Soon as he realizes we're here, we're out. The basement smelled like damp stone and old sweat. 2 cells sat side by side, iron bars thick as a man's wrist. One was empty, the other held Vaughan. He sat on a narrow bench, hands still manacled, head tilted back against the wall. His eyes were closed. He didn't react when they approached. Vaughan, May said. His eyes opened, focused. No surprise registered on his face, just that same flat acknowledgement. Marshal Sutton, he said. Didn't think you'd make it this far. You know who I am? Your father was persistent. You inherited that. Vaughan's gaze shifted to Colt. And you followed. Interesting. Why'd you come to my forge? Colt asked. Because your father knew the truth. And because you're the only gunsmith in 3 territories who'd recognize that serial number. My father's dead. I know. There was something in Vaughan's voice, not quite sympathy, but close. William Mercer was a good man. He tried to help me once. Didn't work out. Help you how? Vaughan was quiet for a moment, then, how much has May told you about Stonefall? Enough, May cut in. We know it wasn't a raid. We know the military was involved. And we know you were there. Then you know more than most. Vaughan straightened, the chains clinking. But you don't know why. So tell us, Colt said. Vaughan studied them both. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, calculation giving way to decision. I was part of a unit, he began. Covert, off the books. Officially, we didn't exist. Our job was to handle problems the Army couldn't acknowledge. Border conflicts with Mexico, renegade tribes, anything that required force but no accountability. He paused. In 1894, we got new orders. Eliminate Stonefall. The words hung in the air like smoke. Why? May's voice was barely above a whisper. Because Stonefall sat on land the government wanted. Rich soil, water rights, mineral deposits. And because the families there refused to sell, refused to move, so someone decided it was easier to erase them than negotiate. Vaughan's jaw tightened. We were told they were harboring criminals, outlaws, that it was a den of violence and lawlessness. We believed it. Or, his gaze dropped. We wanted to believe it. What happened? Colt asked. We rode in at dawn, surrounded the settlement, and when the sun came up and I saw... Vaughan stopped, his hands clenched, the chains pulling taut. Women, children, families, not outlaws, not criminals, just people trying to live. Silence filled the cell. I tried to stop it, Vorn continued. Told my commanding officer the intel was wrong, that we were making a mistake. He said orders were orders. Said if I had a problem with it, I could join them. Vorn's voice went cold. So I did. You deserted, May said. I sabotaged the mission, cut the horses loose, damaged ammunition supplies, gave the settlers warning, bought them time to run. Vorn's eyes lifted, meeting hers. 70 people escaped. That's 70 lives the government couldn't erase. And the rest? Colt's voice came out hoarse. Vorn didn't answer. He didn't have to. They declared you dead, May said. Killed in action. Easier than admitting they had a deserter. Easier than letting me talk. Vorn leaned forward. For 30 years, I've lived in the margins. No name, no history, a ghost. But I kept that rifle, kept it as proof. Because I knew, someday, someone would care enough to ask questions. And now? Colt asked. Now Devlin's here to finish what started in Stonefall. Silence me, destroy the rifle, bury the truth for good. Vorn's gaze sharpened. Unless you stop him. May laughed, short, bitter. We're one marshal and a gunsmith. Devlin has federal authority and an army behind him. You have something better, Vorn said. You have the truth. And you have me. Lot of good that does us when you're locked in a cell. Vorn's mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close. Give it time. Footsteps echoed from the stairs. Heavy, deliberate. May's hand went to her gun. That's our cue. Colt didn't move. What do we do? Find the rifle, Vorn said. Devlin's keeping it close, probably in his office upstairs. Get it, get out, and get it somewhere safe. And then what? Then you make them pay attention. Vorn's eyes burned with something Colt couldn't name. Old rage, older grief. You make them see what they tried so hard to forget. The footsteps grew louder. May grabbed Colt's arm. Move! They bolted for the stairs, taking them two at a time. Behind them, voices rose, Devlin's sharp with anger. They burst into the main hall just as the door to the federal offices swung open. Run, May hissed. They ran. Kikik. Devlin's office was on the second floor, guarded by a clerk whose loyalty to paperwork exceeded his sense of self-preservation. May flashed her badge, spun some story about jurisdictional review, and the kid let them through without a fight. Too easy, Colt muttered as May rifled through the desk drawers. Told you, he's rushing. May pulled out a locked case, narrow and reinforced. Here. Colt grabbed it, heavy, rifle-shaped. How do we... The door banged open. Devlin stood in the threshold, revolver drawn, fury etched into every line of his face. You've made a serious mistake, Marshal. May's gun came up smooth, practiced. Federal overreach isn't jurisdiction, Devlin. That rifle's evidence in an open investigation. There is no investigation. Stonefall is closed, has been for 30 years. Then you won't mind if I take a look. Put the case down. Make me. For a heartbeat, the room balanced on a knife's edge. Colt's pulse roared in his ears. His hands tightened on the case. Then May fired. Not at Devlin, but at the window behind him. Glass exploded. Devlin ducked instinctively, and in that fractional hesitation, May grabbed Colt and hauled him toward the side door. They ran. Through hallways, downstairs, out into the brutal afternoon heat, shouts erupted behind them. Boots thundered on wood. The horses, May yelled. Colt didn't argue. They hit the street at a dead sprint, weaving through startled pedestrians. May's horse, a big roan gelding, stood tied outside a saloon. She vaulted into the saddle, yanking Colt up behind her. Hold on! The gelding surged forward, hooves striking sparks from the packed dirt. Colt clutched the rifle case with one hand and May's waist with the other, the world blurring into heat and dust and the thunder of pursuit. They didn't stop until redemption was a smudge on the horizon behind them. Only then did May slow the gelding to a walk, both of them gasping, sweat-soaked and shaking. That, May panted, was the stupidest thing I've ever done. Colt managed a breathless laugh. What now? May looked back toward town, toward the federal building, toward everything they'd just burned to the ground. Now? She pulled the case from Colt's grip, studying it. Now we find out what's worth killing for. She pried open the lock with her knife. The case fell open. The rifle lay inside, swaddled in oilcloth. May unwrapped it carefully, her hands reverent despite the weapon's decay. She turned it over, examining the serial number, the pitted barrel, the cracked stock. TC7, she murmured. Proof of a ghost company. Proof they existed. Her gaze lifted to Colt. This changes everything. What do we do with it? May was quiet for a long time. Then, we go to Stonefall. We find the rest of the evidence, and we make damn sure the world knows what happened there. Colt thought about Vorn, still locked in that cell, about his father, who'd tried to help and paid for it, about 300 people erased from history like they'd never existed. Then let's go, he said. May nodded. She wrapped the rifle back up, secured it to her saddle, and turned the gelding north, toward the canyon country, toward the place where the dead waited, toward Stonefall. The canyon country swallowed them whole. 3 days north of Redemption, the land transformed from flat scrubland into a maze of red rock and shadow. Towering sandstone walls rose on either side of the narrow trail, their faces carved by wind and time into shapes that looked almost deliberate, like the bones of some massive creature left to bleach in the sun. The air tasted different here, drier, older, like breathing dust that had settled before men walked these lands. May rode in silence, her eyes constantly scanning the ridgelines. Colt sat behind her, the rifle case strapped across his back, feeling exposed despite the canyon walls hemming them in. Maybe because of them. Up there, anyone with a rifle and patience could pick them off before they heard the shot. You always this quiet? Colt asked. When I'm being hunted. May didn't turn around. Devlin's not the type to let this go. He'll send men after us. How many? Enough. The gelding picked its way over loose stone, hooves clicking against rock. Somewhere high up, a hawk screamed. The sound echoed off the canyon walls, multiplying until it seemed like a dozen birds were crying out at once. Tell me about your father, Colt said. He needed conversation, needed something to fill the oppressive silence. You said he investigated Stonefall. May was quiet long enough that Colt thought she wouldn't answer. Then, James Sutton, territorial marshal for 23 years, good man, fair. He didn't look for trouble, but he didn't back down from it either. Her voice went distant. When Stonefall happened, he was the one who got the initial report. Ryder came through saying a settlement had gone dark. No smoke from chimneys, no one answering hails. My father rode out with a deputy to check. What did he find? Empty houses, tables set for meals that never got eaten, laundry on lines, livestock in pens, half-starved but alive. And blood. Not pools of it, just traces, smears on door frames, drops on floorboards, like someone had tried to clean it up but couldn't get it all. May shifted in the saddle. The thing that got to him was the church, door wide open, benches overturned, and on the altar, someone had left a Bible open to Exodus. The plagues. Colt felt cold despite the heat. He thought it was a message. He thought it was mockery. Whoever did this wanted people to think it was divine punishment, raiders, savages, act of nature. May's jaw tightened. But my father counted the bloodstains, measured them, and he realized there weren't enough, not for 300 people. Either most of them escaped or someone moved the bodies. Which? He never got to find out. Federal agents showed up 3 days into his investigation. Same type as Devlin, hard eyes, harder orders. Told him Stonefall was federal jurisdiction now. Told him to file his report and forget about it. May's hand clenched on the reins. He didn't forget. Spent years chasing leads, talked to survivors from nearby settlements, army deserters, anyone who might know something, and slowly, piece by piece, he put it together. The Ghost Company, TC7. A unit that didn't officially exist, staffed by men who were good at killing and better at keeping quiet. They operated in the territories, handling problems the regular army couldn't touch. My father found 3 other settlements that had disappeared under similar circumstances. All of them on land the government wanted. All of them erased within a week of refusing to sell. May glanced back at Colt. He tried to go public with it, wrote letters to newspapers, congressmen, anyone who'd listen. Know what happened? Colt shook his head. Nothing. Letters got lost. Editors said they couldn't print unsubstantiated claims. Congressmen sent polite replies saying they'd look into it. May's voice went flat. And then one night, my father's house caught fire. Faulty lamp oil, the report said. He barely got out alive. Lost everything, his research, his evidence, years of work, all gone. They burned it. Didn't even try to hide it. Just made sure it looked accidental enough that no one would ask questions. May faced forward again. After that, he gave up, or seemed to, kept his head down, did his job, didn't make waves. But before he died, he told me where to look, told me the one piece of evidence they couldn't burn. The rifle. He said if anyone ever came back carrying a Springfield with TC7 stamped on it, that would be the proof. The one thing that could break the whole cover-up open. May's shoulders squared. So when I heard rumors about a man matching Vaughn's description moving through Colorado with a rifle he wouldn't sell, wouldn't trade, wouldn't let out of his sight, I knew. The canyon opened ahead of them into a wider valley. The walls pulled back, revealing scrub brush and scattered juniper trees. In the distance, Colt could see the first hints of structures, weathered wood, collapsed roofs. Is that it? He asked. May reined in the gelding. Her face had gone pale. Yeah, that's Stonefall. They sat there for a long moment, neither moving. The ruins spread out before them like broken teeth, maybe 30 buildings in various states of decay. Most had collapsed completely, their walls caved in, their timbers rotted through. A few still stood, skeletal and listing, held up by sheer stubbornness. At the center of what had once been a town square, a church steeple reached toward the sky, the only structure that seemed mostly intact, though its bell had long since fallen. Doesn't look like much, Colt said quietly. Graveyards never do. May urged the gelding forward. They rode slowly, both of them scanning the ruins for movement. But nothing stirred. No birds sang. Even the wind seemed to avoid this place, flowing around it rather than through it. They dismounted near the church. May tied the gelding to a post that looked ready to collapse, then pulled her rifle from its scabbard. Colt unslung the case with the Springfield, holding it like it might explode. Stay close, May said. Watch the high ground. They moved through the ruins carefully. Up close, the devastation became clearer. Bullet holes pocked the walls, scorch marks darkened the wood. In one house, Colt found a child's toy, a carved horse, one leg broken off, sitting on a windowsill thick with dust. They lived here, he said. The observation felt stupid even as he said it, but somehow he needed to voice it, to acknowledge it. May didn't respond. She was staring at a door frame, running her fingers over dark stains in the wood grain. Her expression had gone hard, distant. May? This is where he stood. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. My father, right here, looking at this exact stain, trying to figure out what happened. She turned to Colt. You know what the worst part is? He knew. Deep down, he knew it was murder, knew it was the government, but he couldn't prove it, couldn't make anyone care, and it ate him alive. Colt wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease the grief carved into May's features. But what comfort existed for this? For 300 lives erased, for decades of silence, for a truth so ugly that powerful men would kill to keep it buried? We'll prove it, he said instead. We'll make them care. May studied him for a moment. Then she nodded once, sharp and decisive. Church. Vaughn said there'd be evidence. They crossed the square. The church loomed larger as they approached, its shadows stretching long in the afternoon sun. The front doors hung open, one dangling from a single hinge. Inside, the air was cooler, stale. Light filtered through gaps in the roof, illuminating dust motes that swirled like tiny ghosts. The interior had been gutted. Pews lay overturned, some splintered like kindling. The altar had been smashed, its pieces scattered across the floor. On the walls, someone had painted symbols, crude, violent slashes that might have been meant to look like tribal markings but felt wrong. Too deliberate, too staged. They wanted it to look like a raid, May said, make it seem random, savage. Colt moved deeper into the church. At the back, near where the pulpit would have stood, he found stairs leading down. The wood was rotted, several steps missing entirely. Below, darkness yawned. Cellar, he called. May joined him, peering down. Think you can make it? One way to find out. He went first, testing each step before putting his weight on it. Twice, wood cracked under his boots, and he had to catch himself on the railing. May followed, more sure-footed, her rifle held ready. The cellar was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. It smelled like earth and decay. At first, Colt thought it was empty, just bare dirt and stone walls. Then May struck a match, and in the flare of light, he saw it. A chest. Iron-bound, locked, shoved into the corner and half buried in dirt. "Help me," May said. They dug with their hands, scooping away decades of accumulated soil. The chest was heavier than it looked. The metal rusted, but intact. The lock had corroded shut. May smashed it with the butt of her rifle, 3 hard strikes that echoed in the confined space. On the third hit, the lock broke. She lifted the lid. Inside, papers. Stacks of them, wrapped in oilcloth to protect against moisture. May pulled them out carefully, spreading them on the floor. Even in the dim light, Colt could make out official seals, military letterhead, signatures. "Orders," May breathed. "Deployment orders for TC-7. She rifled through more pages. "Reconnaissance reports, supply requisitions, and this—" She held up a single sheet, her hand shaking. "This is a kill list." Colt leaned closer. The paper was covered in names, maybe 50 of them, written in neat administrative script. Next to each name, a check mark. "Every person in Stonefall," May said. They documented them. Made sure they knew who they were killing. Her voice broke. "My father's sister is on this list. Maria Sutton. She married a farmer and moved out here. I never knew her. She died before I was born. But she's here. They killed her and they checked her off like she was inventory." Colt's stomach twisted. He turned away, trying to breathe through the nausea. This wasn't abstract anymore, wasn't history or cover-up or political maneuvering. It was names, people. A woman named Maria who'd married a farmer and tried to build a life and died for it. "There's more," May said. She pulled out a leather folder, opened it. Inside were photographs, actual photographs, grainy and faded but unmistakable. Men in uniform standing in formation, a commanding officer on horseback, and in the background of one photo, barely visible, the ruins of Stonefall burning. "They documented it," Colt said, horrified. "They took pictures." Proof of mission completion. May's face had gone white. They were proud of it. She kept digging through the chest. More reports. More photographs. And at the very bottom, wrapped separately, a journal. The leather cover was cracked and water-stained, but when May opened it, the pages inside were readable. She read aloud, October 14th, 1894. Received orders to neutralize Stonefall settlement, command sites harboring of fugitives, and resistance to federal authority. Unit prepared for dawn assault. Her voice steadied as she read, taking on the flat tone of the writer. October 15th. Operation executed. Minimal resistance. Civilians attempted negotiation. Command ordered full suppression. Casualties? May stopped. "What?" Colt asked. "Casualties, 228 confirmed. 72 unaccounted." May looked up. Vorn was telling the truth. 72 people escaped. Who wrote this? May flipped to the front page. A name was written in the same neat script. Captain Adrian Hale. Hale! The name meant nothing to Colt, but May's reaction was immediate. Her face went rigid, her breath catching. "You know him," Colt said. "I know of him. Colonel Adrian Hale, retired. Lives in Santa Fe now. Decorated officer, military hero, consulted by the territorial government on security matters." May's lip curled. "Respectable. Untouchable." "Not anymore." May stared at the journal in her hands. "This is everything. Orders, photos, a first-hand account. With this and the rifle, we can bury him, expose the whole operation. Then let's—" A gunshot cracked through the air. The bullet punched through the floorboards above them, sending splinters raining down. May and Colt threw themselves flat as more shots followed. A rapid staccato that said multiple shooters, coordinated fire. "Devlin," May hissed. They scrambled for the stairs. Above, voices shouted, men calling positions, coordinating. Boots thundered across the church floor. Colt's heart hammered so hard he could feel it in his teeth. They were trapped. The cellar had one exit, and it opened right into the kill zone. May grabbed his arm, pressed her rifle into his hands. "You know how to shoot?" "Not well." "Good enough. When I say go, you run for the back wall. There's a gap in the foundation. Saw it when we came in. Small, but you'll fit. What about you? I'll cover you. May pulled her revolver, checked the cylinder. 6 rounds. Soon as you're through, you run. Don't stop, don't look back. Get to the gelding and ride. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. One of us has to get this evidence out. She shoved the journal and photographs into his coat. Go to Santa Fe. Find a newspaper, a judge, someone who'll listen. Make them publish it. May, go! She fired up through the floorboards, not aiming, just forcing the men above to scatter. In the confusion, Colt bolted for the back wall. He found the gap May mentioned, a crack where the foundation had shifted, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. He threw himself at it, scraping skin off his shoulders as he forced his body into the opening. Behind him, May's guns roared. Return fire shredded the air. Wood exploded. Someone screamed. Colt wriggled through the gap, emerging into daylight on the far side of the church. He could hear May still firing, could hear men shouting, could hear... The shooting stopped. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. May! Colt started back toward the church. Don't... The voice came from behind him, cold, familiar. Colt turned. Devlin stood 20 feet away, revolver leveled at Colt's chest. He wasn't alone. 4 men flanked him, all armed, all watching Colt with the empty eyes of professionals who'd done this before and would do it again. Drop the rifle, Devlin said. Colt's hands tightened on May's rifle. He was a gunsmith, not a gunfighter. Couldn't outdraw 5 men. Couldn't even outdraw 1. But the papers in his coat, the evidence... I said drop it. Colt let the rifle fall. Smart. Now the papers. Go to hell. Devlin's expression didn't change. He gestured. 2 of his men moved forward, fast and efficient. They grabbed Colt, slammed him against the church wall hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. Hands rifled through his coat, pulling out the journal, the photographs, everything May had given him. No! Colt struggled. A fist caught him in the gut, doubling him over. Devlin took the papers, flipped through them with clinical detachment. His jaw tightened fractionally, the only sign that what he was seeing affected him at all. You have any idea what you've done? He asked. Colt spat blood. Exposed you. Complicated things. Devlin tucked the papers into his own coat. Marshal Sutton is dead. You're about to be. And these, he patted his coat, are going to burn. By tomorrow, this whole mess will be buried again. Cleaner this time. People know. You can't kill everyone. Don't have to. Just have to kill the ones who matter. Devlin raised his revolver. The shot came from somewhere high up. The church steeple. It took Devlin in the shoulder, spinning him around. He went down hard, blood spraying. His men scattered, diving for cover, guns coming up. More shots rang out, precise, measured, each one finding a target. One man dropped, clutching his leg. Another took a round through his gun hand and fell screaming. In the chaos, Colt ran. He didn't know where the shots were coming from, didn't care. He just ran, legs pumping, lungs burning, expecting a bullet in the back with every step. He made it to the edge of the ruins before a hand grabbed his collar and yanked him behind a collapsed wall. Stay down! Colt looked up into Vorn's face. The older man looked worse for wear, bruised, bleeding from a cut above his eye, his shirt torn, but his hands were steady on the rifle he held. Not the Springfield, something modern, a Winchester, well-maintained. How? Colt started. Later. Vorn fired twice more. Someone cried out. Where's May? The church. She covered me. I don't know if she's alive. Saw Devlin's men haul her out. Means she's leverage. Vorn's eyes tracked movement across the ruins. How many men did you see? 5, including Devlin. There were 8, 3 are down. Leaves 5. Vorn calculated angles, distances. They'll regroup, try to flank us. We need to get May. We need to not die first. Vorn handed Colt a revolver, old, worn, but functional. You know how to use this? Point and shoot? Close enough. Don't waste bullets. Don't shoot unless you're sure. And for the love of... Vorn paused, recalibrating. Don't hit me. They moved through the ruins in a low crouch. Vorn led, using the collapsed buildings as cover, his movements economical and precise. Every few yards he'd stop, listen, scan. Colt tried to imitate him but felt clumsy, exposed. His breath came too loud. His feet found every loose stone. A man stepped around a corner 10 feet ahead. Vorn shot him before Colt even registered the threat. The man went down without a sound. Vorn kept moving like nothing had happened. "How did you escape?" Colt whispered. "Devlin got sloppy. Thought he had me contained. Left 2 guards. Vorn's tone suggested what had happened to those guards. Took their weapons, their horses, tracked you north. For 3 days? I'm motivated. Vorn stopped at a gap between buildings, studying the church. There, second window, someone's watching. Colt looked, saw nothing. Then, a flicker of movement, shadow against shadow. I don't have a shot, Vorn muttered. Too much cover. He glanced at Colt. You're going to hate this. Hate what? Creating a distraction. Before Colt could protest, Vorn was moving, not toward the church, but away from it, circling wide. Colt realized the plan a second before it became unavoidable. Vorn was leaving him alone to draw fire. Wait! Gunshots erupted, but not at Colt. At Vorn, who'd broken cover deliberately, sprinting across open ground. Bullets chewed up the dirt around his feet. He dove behind a water trough, came up firing. The man in the window took Vorn's bait, leaning out to get a better angle. Colt didn't think. He just raised the revolver and fired. The shot went wide. Not by much, but enough. It did what it needed to, though. The man in the window jerked back, turning toward this new threat. In that instant, Vorn's rifle cracked. The man fell. Silence again. Heavier this time. Vorn emerged from behind the trough, reloading as he walked. Not bad. Terrible aim, but good instinct. Colt's hands were shaking. I almost shot him. Almost only counts in horseshoes, Vorn nodded toward the church. 2 left besides Devlin. They'll be inside with May, using her as a shield. So what do we do? Vorn's jaw worked like he was chewing on options he didn't like. Finally, we negotiate. They'll kill her the second they don't need her. Probably, but it buys time, and time's all we need. For what? Vorn's smile was cold. You'll see. They approached the church openly, hands visible, weapons lowered. Vorn called out, Devlin, we need to talk. A long pause. Then Devlin's voice strained with pain. You're surrounded, Vorn. Give up now, and I'll make it quick. You're bleeding out from a shoulder wound and down to 2 men. Your odds aren't great either. Vorn stopped at the church steps. Let's make a deal. No deals. You're a dead man. I've been a dead man for 30 years. Hasn't stuck yet. Vorn's voice carried across the ruins, calm and matter-of-fact. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to let Marshal Sutton go. In exchange, I'll surrender. Colt grabbed Vorn's arm. What are you... Vorn shook him off. And you're going to let the boy go too. He's got no part in this. You think I'm stupid? Devlin laughed. Wet. Pained. You've got evidence. You've got the rifle. I let anyone walk. This whole operation's blown. The evidence is gone, Vorn said. Burned it myself after we left the cellar. The rifle too. Nothing left but us. Colt opened his mouth to protest the lie, but Vorn's hand clamped down on his shoulder, hard, silencing. You're lying, Devlin said. But there was uncertainty in his voice now. Check the cellar if you don't believe me. Fire's still smoldering. Vorn took a step closer. Face it, Devlin. This is over. You lost. But you can still walk away. Let them go. Take me, and you can bury this whole mess. Tell your bosses the evidence was destroyed. The deserters in custody. Problem solved. Another long silence. Colt could almost hear Devlin calculating, weighing options. How do I know you'll surrender? Devlin asked. Because I'm tired. And for the first time since Colt had met him, Vorn sounded it, bone-deep exhausted. 30 years running, 30 years hiding. I'm done. I just want it to end. More silence. Then, come inside. Slow. Hands where I can see them. Vorn started forward. Colt grabbed his arm. He'll kill you. I know. Then why? Oh, because May's still alive. And because you need to get out of here. Vorn pressed something into Colt's hand. A key. There's a horse tied half a mile east. Supplies in the saddlebags, including a duplicate set of the documents from the cellar. I made copies before they caught me in redemption. His eyes burned into Colt's. Your father tried to help me expose this and they destroyed him. Don't let that happen again. Take those papers. Get them to someone who matters. Make them see. Vorn, go. Vorn walked toward the church. Colt watched him go, every instinct screaming to do something, anything. But what? He was one man with a revolver and no idea how to use it. Vorn was buying him an escape with his life. Colt ran. He ran through the ruins, past collapsed houses and broken dreams, past the graves of 300 people whose names had been checked off a list. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs threatened to give out. And when he found the horse exactly where Vorn said it would be, he collapsed against its side, gasping. Behind him, the church remained silent. He waited. 5 minutes. 10. Expecting gunshots, screams, something. Nothing came. Finally, unable to stand the uncertainty, Colt mounted the horse and rode back to the edge of the ruins. From high ground, he could see the church. The doors stood open. No movement visible. Then smoke. Thin at first, then thicker, pouring from the windows and gaps in the roof. Fire. No, Colt breathed. The flames spread fast, feeding on decades of dry wood. Within minutes, the entire structure was engulfed, the steeple collapsing inward with a roar that echoed across the canyon. Orange light painted the ruins, turning them briefly beautiful and terrible. Colt sat frozen, watching it burn. Watching the only evidence that mattered go up in smoke. Watching. A figure emerged from the flames. May stumbled out the side door, coughing, her clothes singed. She collapsed in the dirt, rolled to extinguish smoldering fabric, then pushed herself up and started running. Away from the church, toward the edge of the ruins. Colt kicked the horse into motion, racing to intercept her. She saw him coming, raised her revolver, then recognized him and lowered it. He pulled her up behind him. "Where's Vorn?"
"Still inside." May's voice was raw. "He went in alone, talked to Devlin. I couldn't hear what they said, but..." She coughed. "Devlin shot him. Then Vorn. He had something. Bottle. Smashed it against the wall, and the whole place went up." "He started the fire?" "He wanted it to burn. Wanted to trap them inside." May looked back at the inferno. Devlin and his men, they're still in there. They watched together as the church collapsed completely, the walls caving in, the timbers turning to ash. The heat was intense even from 100 yards away. Nothing could survive that. Nothing human, anyway. "The papers," May said. "Did you—" Colt patted the saddlebags. "Copies. Vorn made copies." May's shoulders sagged with relief. "Then he bought us something. A chance." "He bought it with his life." "I know." May's hand found Colt's shoulder, squeezed once. "Don't waste it."
They rode away as the sun set, the flames of Stonefall lighting the sky behind them. Colt didn't look back. He couldn't. If he looked back, he'd see Vorn walking into that church, see the resignation in his eyes, see a man who'd spent 30 years running finally choosing to stand still. Heroes were supposed to survive in stories, supposed to get their redemption, their recognition, their reward. But this wasn't a story. This was just the truth, ugly and incomplete, and the truth burned. They made camp that night in a dry wash 5 miles from Stonefall. May tended the horse while Colt built a small fire, barely enough to heat coffee, not enough to signal their position. They sat on opposite sides of the flames, not talking. There wasn't much to say. Finally, May broke the silence. "You did good back there." "I ran. You survived. Kept the evidence safe. That's what mattered." May poured coffee into tin cups, handed one to Colt. Vorn knew what he was doing. He made his choice. Some choice. Die in a fire or get executed by Devlin. The choice was coming back at all. May stared into her coffee. He could have stayed hidden, lived out his life as a ghost. But he came back. Brought that rifle to your forge, knowing it would bring the dogs running. He chose to fight. Colt thought about the rifle, now ash in Stonefall's ruins, the one piece of physical evidence that could directly tie the military to TC-7. Gone. "We still have the documents," May said, reading his thoughts. "Photos, orders, Hale's journal. It's enough." "Is it? Devlin's dead, but whoever gave him orders is still out there." "I know." May set down her cup. "But now we have names, chain of command. We can trace this back to whoever authorized Stonefall. And then what? They'll send more Devlins, more men with guns and federal authority. We can't fight that. We don't fight it. We expose it. May pulled out the journal, opened it to a page near the end. Hale didn't just document Stonefall. He documented 4 other operations. 4 other settlements erased the same way. If we can prove a pattern, we can prove it was policy. Not one rogue unit, but systematic elimination. Colt felt sick. How many people? May flipped through pages, counting. 1,100, give or take. 1,100 people. 1,100 names checked off lists. 1,100 lives deemed expendable because they stood between the government and land it wanted. We need allies, Colt said. Someone with power who can't be intimidated. I've been thinking about that. May tapped the journal. Hale's in Santa Fe, retired, respected. If we can get to him, he'll deny everything. Probably, but denial's not the same as silence. We confront him publicly, present the evidence, make him respond. Even if he lies, it forces the question into the open, makes people ask what really happened at Stonefall. Colt considered it. Risky. He might have us killed before we get close. He might, but he's also old, arrogant, and convinced he's untouchable. Men like that make mistakes. May closed the journal. Besides, what's the alternative? Hide? Run? Vorn spent 30 years doing that. I won't. Your father. My father tried to fight this alone and they crushed him. But we're not alone. We have each other. And we have evidence he never had. May's eyes hardened. I'm going to Santa Fe. I'm going to look Colonel Adrian Hale in the eye. And I'm going to make him see the ghosts of everyone he killed. Colt should have been terrified. Should have made excuses. Found a way out. Gone back to his forge and his simple life. But sitting there in the firelight, watching May's determination burn brighter than the flames, he found he couldn't. His father had tried to help Vorn and paid for it. Vorn had tried to expose the truth and died for it. May's father had spent his life chasing justice and been broken by it. Too many ghosts already. Too much silence. I'm coming with you, Colt said. May studied him. You understand what that means? There's no going back after this. Your shop, your life in redemption, it's gone. Even if we succeed, even if we expose everything, you'll be marked. The people we're going after, they don't forgive. Then I guess I better get used to looking over my shoulder. A smile flickered across May's face, brief, genuine. Your father would be proud. My father would think I'm an idiot. That too. May stood, dusted off her pants. We should move at first light. Santa Fe's a week's ride if we push hard. Gives us time to plan. Plan what? How to corner a decorated war hero and accuse him of mass murder without getting shot. May's smile turned sharp. Should be interesting. They took turns on watch that night. Colt drew the first shift, sitting with his back to a rock and May's rifle across his lap. The desert stretched out before him, silver under starlight, beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere in that vastness, Stonefall's ruins still smoldered. He thought about Vorn walking into that church, about May, dragging evidence from a cellar while bullets flew, about his father, trying to help a man the government wanted erased, about the choice in front of him now. He could still walk away. Take a horse, ride west, disappear into California or Oregon, start over where no one knew his name or his history, live a quiet life, die a quiet death. But he'd know, he'd always know. And that knowledge would hollow him out from the inside until there was nothing left but a shell going through motions. No. He'd chosen his path when he followed Vorn into this. Now he had to see it through, even if it killed him. Especially if it killed him. Because some things were worth dying for. And the truth, ugly, terrible, necessary, was one of them. Santa Fe rose from the high desert like something conjured from fever dreams. Adobe buildings the color of dried blood, narrow streets that twisted without logic, church bells marking time for people who seemed in no particular hurry. The city had a weight to it, layers of history pressed down like sediment, Spanish conquest, Mexican rule, American occupation, each empire leaving its mark before moving on. Colt and May rode in just after dawn on the 7th day, covered in trail dust and exhaustion. They'd pushed hard, sleeping in snatches, always watching their back trail. No pursuit materialized, but that didn't mean they were safe. It just meant whoever was coming hadn't caught up yet. We need information, May said as they walked their horses down a side street. Find out where Hale lives, what his routine is. Can't confront him if we can't find him. Can't confront him without getting arrested either. Colt shifted in the saddle, his body one long ache. We're wanted now. Devlin might be dead, but his bosses aren't. They'll have sent word. Then we stay quiet, keep our heads down. May pulled her hat lower. There's a boarding house on the east side, run by a woman who doesn't ask questions. We'll start there. The boarding house turned out to be a weathered two-story building with a courtyard garden gone to weeds. The proprietor was a rail-thin woman in her 60s who took May's money without comment and showed them to a room at the back, small, hot, with one narrow window that looked onto an alley. Perfect for people who didn't want to be seen. May collapsed on the bed without removing her boots. Sleep first, then we plan. Colt wanted to argue that they didn't have time for sleep, that every hour they delayed gave Hale's people more time to find them. But his body had other ideas. The moment he sat down, the exhaustion hit like a physical blow. He was asleep before he could finish the thought. He woke to late afternoon light and the smell of cooking meat. May was gone. For a panicked moment, Colt thought she'd left, taken the evidence and gone after Hale alone. Then he heard footsteps on the stairs and she pushed through the door carrying 2 plates of food. Enchiladas, she said. Not great, but edible. They ate in silence. The food was actually better than advertised, spicy enough to wake Colt's senses, filling enough to ease the hollow in his gut. May had also brought a newspaper, which she spread across the bed. No mention of Stonefall, she said. No mention of federal agents killed in the line of duty. Nothing. They're covering it up, or they haven't decided how to spin it yet. May tapped the paper. But there's this society column. Colonel Adrian Hale is being honored tomorrow night at a gala for military veterans. Presentation at the governor's palace, 7 in the evening. Colt wiped his mouth. That's our window. Public place. Lots of witnesses. We present the evidence in front of everyone, force him to respond. Or he has us shot the moment we open our mouths. Risk we take. May folded the paper. I spent the afternoon asking around. Hale's well-connected here. Friends in the territorial government, the military, the church, wealthy, respected. The kind of man who gets statues, not accusations. Which makes it harder. Which makes it necessary. May's jaw set. Men like Hale get away with it because no one challenges them. Everyone's too afraid, too convinced of their own powerlessness. But that's how it works. Silence protects them. We break the silence, we break their protection. Colt thought about the kill list. 228 names checked off. What if no one believes us? Some will, some won't. But once the question's asked, it can't be unasked. People will dig. Journalists, lawyers, families of the victims. And eventually, May's expression hardened. Eventually the truth comes out. It always does. Vorn waited 30 years. And he's dead. I'm not waiting that long. They spent the evening preparing. May cleaned her revolver, checked the ammunition, made sure everything functioned smoothly. Colt went through the documents again, organizing them, marking the most damning passages. Hale's journal, the kill list, the photographs showing TC-7 in Stonefall's ruins. We should make more copies, Colt said, in case we don't make it out. May didn't sugarcoat it. Good idea. There's a printer 2 streets over. I saw it earlier. They waited until full dark, then slipped out through the courtyard. The printer's shop was closed, but May picked the lock with a piece of wire, and they let themselves in. The press was old but functional. Colt set the type while May worked the mechanism, and by midnight they had 3 complete sets of documents, originals plus duplicates. One set stays here, May said. Hidden. If we die, maybe someone finds it eventually. Optimistic. Practical. She wrapped one set in oilcloth and tucked it behind a loose brick in the shop's back wall. The other sets we carry. You take one, I take one. We get separated. We both still have evidence. Back at the boarding house, Colt tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind kept circling the same thoughts. What if Hale had them killed before they could speak? What if the crowd turned hostile? What if the evidence wasn't enough, wasn't convincing, wasn't— You're thinking too loud, May said from the other bed. Can't help it. Try. A pause. We're doing the right thing. Doesn't mean it'll work. No, but it means it's worth trying. May rolled over to face him. My father used to say, justice doesn't happen because good people are strong. It happens because good people refuse to quit, even when quitting makes sense. Your father also got his house burned down. And before that, he lived with integrity. He looked at himself in the mirror and didn't flinch. May's voice softened. That's worth something. Maybe worth more than winning. Colt wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that dying for the truth meant something beyond just being dead. But lying there in the dark, knowing tomorrow might be his last day breathing, he couldn't quite make himself buy it. Still, he was here. And he wasn't leaving. That had to count for something. Morning came too fast. May woke him before dawn, already dressed, already checking her weapons. They ate a cold breakfast, bread and cheese from the boarding house kitchen, and went over the plan one more time. We arrive separately, May said. I go in through the main entrance, you through the service door. We meet inside, find positions near the stage. When Hale's giving his speech, we interrupt. Together, loud enough everyone hears. And then we see what happens. May strapped on her gun belt, adjusted it. Could go a dozen different ways, but the key is, we both speak. We both present evidence. They can't silence both of us at once. They can if they start shooting. Then we die loud. May met his eyes. You ready for that? Colt checked the revolver Vorn had given him, still loaded, still functional. He tucked it into his belt, pulled his coat over it. No, but let's go anyway. They split up 2 blocks from the governor's palace. May headed straight for the main plaza, while Colt circled around to the service entrance. The building was massive, old Spanish colonial architecture with thick walls and narrow windows. Guards stood at the front checking invitations. The service door had no guard, just a harried-looking kitchen worker hauling in crates. Colt waited until the man went inside, then slipped through after him. The interior was chaos. Cooks shouting orders, servants rushing between rooms, the clatter of dishes and glassware. No one gave Colt a second look. He was just another body in work clothes, invisible in the commotion. He grabbed an empty tray to blend in and made his way toward the main hall. The gala was already underway. Men in formal suits and military dress uniforms mingled with women in elaborate gowns. Champagne flowed. A string quartet played something delicate and forgettable in the corner. At the far end of the hall, a raised platform had been set up with a podium and velvet chairs for the guests of honor. Colt spotted May near the sidewall, half hidden behind a marble column. She saw him, gave a fractional nod. They were both in position. Now they just had to wait for Hale. The colonel arrived 20 minutes later to polite applause. He was older than Colt expected, mid-70s at least, white-haired and slightly stooped. But he moved with the careful precision of someone used to being in charge, and his eyes were sharp. He wore his dress uniform, medals gleaming on his chest like armor. A territorial official gave a lengthy introduction, praising Hale's service, his leadership, his contributions to the territory's security. The crowd nodded along, bored but dutiful. Hale stood beside the podium, accepting the accolades with practiced humility. Finally, the official stepped aside and Hale took the podium. Thank you, he began, his voice stronger than his appearance suggested. I'm honored by your recognition. My service was a privilege, not a burden. And Colonel Hale. May's voice cut through the hall like a gunshot. The room went silent, heads turned. May stepped forward from the column, her hand resting on her gun belt. Not drawing, just visible. Marshal Sutton? Hale's expression shifted. Surprise, then calculation. This is highly irregular. So is massacring 300 civilians and covering it up for 30 years. A ripple went through the crowd. Murmurs, confusion. Hale's face went still. I don't know what you're talking about, he said carefully. Stonefall, October 1894. May pulled out the journal, held it up. Your journal, your words, your confession. Colt moved forward from the other side, drawing eyes. We have documents, orders, photographs, kill lists with names checked off like inventory. Hale's jaw tightened. Those are fabrications. Lies created by criminals trying to— Your handwriting's in this journal, May interrupted. Your signature's on the orders. Your face is in the photographs. She opened the journal, read aloud. October 15th, 1894. Operation executed. Minimal resistance. Civilians attempted negotiation. Command ordered full suppression. Casualties 228 confirmed. The crowd was dead silent now. Even the quartet had stopped playing.
You documented it, May continued. You were proud of it. You treated human lives like a military objective, and you checked them off when they were dead. Enough! Hale's voice cracked like a whip. Guards, remove these people. 2 men in uniform moved forward. May's hand went to her revolver. Touch me, and I start reading names, she said. Every single person you killed. Out loud. In front of everyone here. The guards hesitated. Go ahead, Hale said. Read your fabricated list. No one will believe you.
Maria Sutton, May said. Age 28. Married to Daniel Sutton, farmer. Killed October 15th, 1894. Her voice didn't waver. My aunt. My father's sister. She moved to Stonefall to start a family, and you murdered her. Something flickered in Hale's expression. Not guilt. Recognition. He remembered.
Thomas Brennan, May continued, age 41, schoolteacher. Catherine Brennan, age 37. Their children. Margaret, age 12. James, age 9. Sarah, age 6. She looked up. All dead? All checked off your list. This is slander, Hale said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Colt pulled out the photographs, held them up. This is you, standing in Stonefall, October 1894. The settlement's burning in the background. People in the crowd craned to see. Someone gasped. The photographs were grainy, faded, but unmistakable. Those could be anywhere, Hale said. They're marked, Colt countered. Date, location, mission designation, TC7, your unit. He looked at the crowd. The government sent a covert military unit to eliminate an entire settlement because the people there refused to sell their land. They called it a Comanche raid to cover it up. But it was murder. Planned, documented, executed by soldiers under Colonel Hale's command. Lies, Hale said, but he was sweating now. Then explain the journal, May said. Explain the photographs. Explain why Elias Vorn, one of your own men, spent 30 years in hiding because he refused to participate in your massacre. Vorn was a deserter, a traitor. Vorn was the only one with a conscience. May's voice burned. He sabotaged your mission, gave people time to escape. 72 lives saved because one man chose to be human instead of a killer. The crowd was murmuring now, agitated. Colt saw doubt on faces, shock, anger. Not everyone. Some still looked skeptical, defensive. But the seed was planted. Hale seemed to realize he was losing control. His hand went to his side, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Civilian event, no sidearms allowed. His eyes swept the room, landing on the guards. Arrest them, he ordered. Fabrication of evidence, slander of a military officer, disruption of official proceedings. The guards moved forward again. This time they didn't hesitate. May drew her revolver. Stay back. You going to shoot us in front of all these witnesses? One guard asked. That'll prove your credibility. Maybe not, but it'll make you bleed same as anyone. May's aim didn't waver. And I'm tired of powerful men getting away with murder because no one had the spine to stop them. Colt drew his own revolver, though his hand shook. 2 guns against a room full of hostile or uncertain people. Not great odds. This doesn't have to end badly, a voice said from the crowd. An older man stepped forward, gray beard, expensive suit, the bearing of someone used to being listened to. I'm Judge Morrison, Territorial Court. He looked at May. You're making serious accusations. Accusations that, if false, carry severe penalties. They're not false. Then you'll submit to proper legal proceedings. Present your evidence in court under oath, where it can be examined. And get killed on the way to the courthouse? May's laugh was bitter. We've already had federal agents try to silence us. We present this evidence in private, it disappears. We disappear. I give you my word, Morrison said. Safe passage to trial. Protection during proceedings. If your evidence is genuine, it will be heard. Your word against 30 years of cover-up. My word is all I have to offer. Morrison's gaze swept to Hale, then back to May. But consider, you've already done what you came to do. Everyone here has heard your accusations, heard the names, seen the photographs. Even if you die tonight, the question's been asked. The truth is loose. May stood frozen, torn. Colt could see the calculation in her eyes. They could shoot their way out, maybe,
Die in the attempt, probably. Or they could take Morrison's offer and hope it wasn't a trap.
May, Colt said quietly.
Vorn didn't die so we could commit suicide in a ballroom. She looked at him. Her jaw worked. Finally, she lowered her revolver. Safe passage, she said to Morrison. Protection, and a public trial. Open to press, open to observers. No backroom deals. Agreed. Hale exploded. You can't seriously be considering this farce. These are criminals, liars. Then you have nothing to fear from a trial, Morrison said mildly. Evidence will be examined. Experts will verify authenticity. If these documents are fabrications, that will become clear. And if they're real? Someone in the crowd asked. Morrison's expression went grim. Then we have a great deal to answer for. The guards took May and Colt into custody, gently, which was something. They confiscated the weapons, but not the documents. Morrison insisted the evidence remain with him personally, sealed and protected. Hale protested vehemently, but he was outnumbered now. The crowd's mood had shifted. People wanted answers. They were taken to a holding facility in the courthouse basement. Not cells, exactly. More like secured rooms. May paced hers like a caged animal. Colt sat on the narrow cot, trying to process what had just happened. They'd done it. They'd confronted Hale publicly, presented the evidence, asked the question, and they were still alive. For now. Morrison visited them an hour later, carrying the documents in a locked case. I've examined these preliminarily, he said. The journal appears authentic. The photographs are consistent with the time period. The military orders bear genuine seals and signatures. So you believe us, May said. I believe this warrants investigation. Morrison set the case down. I've scheduled a preliminary hearing for 3 days from now, public, as agreed. In the meantime, you'll remain here under protection. No visitors except your legal counsel. We don't have counsel. You do now. I've appointed Thomas Garrett, former prosecutor, excellent reputation. He'll review the evidence and prepare your case. Colt frowned. Why are you doing this? You don't know us. Don't owe us anything. Morrison was quiet for a moment. 30 years ago, I was a young lawyer. I worked on a case involving missing persons from a settlement up north. The case was shut down before I could finish investigating. Federal orders, national security. I was told to drop it and forget about it. His expression darkened. I've always wondered what I would have found if I'd kept digging. Now I know. And I'll be damned if I let another cover-up bury the truth. Hale's people will come for us, May said. You know that. Let them try. You're under court protection now. Anyone who touches you answers to me. Morrison picked up the case. Get some rest. You've started something that can't be stopped. Might as well be ready for what comes next. He left. The door locked behind him. May finally stopped pacing. She sat down heavily, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. We're alive. Yeah. I didn't think we would be. Me neither. Colt lay back on the cot, staring at the ceiling. What happens now? Now we wait, see if Morrison's protection holds, see if the hearing actually happens. May rubbed her face. See if any of this was worth it. It was worth it. Even if... The explosion cut him off. The building shook. Somewhere above them, glass shattered. Shouting erupted. Then gunfire. Rapid. Sustained. The sound of professional violence. May was on her feet instantly. They're coming. The door to Colt's room burst open. Not guards. Men in dark clothes, faces covered, moving with military precision. One grabbed Colt, yanked him upright, shoved a gun against his spine. Move. They hauled him into the corridor. May was already there, similarly restrained. The men said nothing, just pushed them toward the stairs. Up, not down, toward the street. Where are you taking us? May demanded. No answer, just the barrel of a gun pressed harder against her back. They emerged into chaos. The courthouse front had been demolished. The explosion. People screamed, ran. Fire licked at the building's facade. And waiting at the curb, a carriage, black and anonymous. The men shoved them inside. The door slammed. The carriage lurched into motion. Colt's mind raced. This was it. They were being disappeared, taken somewhere quiet where no one would find the bodies. Everything they'd risked, everything Vorn had died for. The carriage stopped. They'd traveled maybe 5 minutes. Not far enough to leave the city. The door opened. Colonel Hale stood outside, flanked by armed men. His expression was cold, controlled. The panic from the gala was gone. This was the military commander, the man who'd ordered a massacre and slept fine afterward. Out, he said. They were pulled from the carriage. Colt looked around, trying to orient himself. They were in a warehouse district, abandoned buildings, no witnesses. Perfect place for an execution. You've made things very complicated, Hale said. Morrison's protection, a public hearing, evidence in court custody. He shook his head. Sloppy. Devlin should have handled this cleaner. Devlin's dead, May said. I'm aware, which is why I'm here. Hale studied them both with the detached interest of a man examining insects. You understand you've already lost, yes? The hearing won't happen. Morrison will suffer an unfortunate accident. The evidence will be destroyed. And you, he gestured, will vanish, just like Stonefall. People know, Colt said. Everyone at that gala heard. Heard accusations from criminals, discredited before they could be verified. Hale smiled. By morning, you'll be wanted fugitives who attacked a government facility and killed a judge. The narrative writes itself. You can't kill everyone who knows. Don't have to, just the ones who matter. Hale nodded to his men. Make it quick. The guns came up. Colt closed his eyes. This was it. End of the line. At least they tried. At least gunfire erupted, but not at them. The men surrounding Hale jerked, stumbled, fell. Blood bloomed on dark clothing. They scrambled for cover as more shots rang out, coming from the warehouse rooftops, the shadows between buildings, everywhere and nowhere. Hale dove behind the carriage. Return fire! His remaining men tried. They shot blindly into the darkness, muzzle flashes lighting the night. But the attackers, whoever they were, had position, numbers, and surprise. One by one, Hale's men went down. Then silence. A figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, moving with the economical grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime fighting. He carried a Winchester rifle, smoke still curling from the barrel. Colt's breath caught. Vorn? The figure stepped into the lamplight. It wasn't Vorn, but the resemblance was there. Same weathered features, same pale eyes, same bearing. This man was younger, maybe mid-40s, with scars that spoke of hard living and harder choices. Name's Jacob Kane, the man said. I served with Elias Vorn in TC-7. He looked at Hale. And I'm here to make sure you answer for what you did. More figures emerged from the darkness. 6 men, all armed, all moving with military precision. All, Colt realized, former members of the Ghost Company. Hale's face had gone white. You're supposed to be dead. We were supposed to be a lot of things, Kane said. Loyal, silent, forgetful. Turns out, some of us weren't any of those. He lowered his rifle slightly. Vorn reached out before he died, told us what he was planning, asked if we'd help. And you agreed, May said. Took some convincing. Most of us have spent 30 years trying to forget Stonefall. But Vorn, he reminded us we were soldiers once, before we were killers. Kane's jaw tightened. He said it was time to choose again. Be what we were trained to be, or be what we became. Touching, Hale spat, but irrelevant. You kill me and a dozen more will come after you. Probably. But see, that's the thing about being dead men. Kane smiled without humor. We've got nothing left to lose. He raised his rifle. Wait, Morrison's voice cut through the night. The judge appeared from behind a warehouse, flanked by territorial marshals. He looked shaken, but alive. Don't shoot him. Why the hell not? Kane demanded. Because we need him alive for trial. His testimony, his answers, that's how we get the others, the ones who gave the orders. Morrison moved forward. You kill him now. He's a martyr. A murdered war hero. But put him on trial. Make him face what he did. That breaks the machine. Kane looked at May and Colt. Your call. May stared at Hale for a long time. Colt could see the war in her eyes. Vengeance versus justice. The easy path versus the right one. Trial, she said finally. Public. Every word recorded, every crime exposed. She stepped closer to Hale. And then you can rot in a cell for the rest of your miserable life, knowing everyone sees you for what you are. Hale said nothing, but something in his eyes had broken. Morrison's marshals moved in, taking Hale into custody. The colonel didn't resist, didn't speak, just stared at Kane and the other former soldiers with something that might have been recognition or might have been despair. As they led him away, Kane turned to May and Colt. Vorn said you had the evidence. Said you'd see it through. We're trying, Colt said. Then keep trying. We'll make sure no one stops you. Kane glanced at his men. We've been hiding long enough. Time to stand in the light. Morrison approached, looking exhausted. The hearing's still on. 3 days. I'll make sure it's public. Make sure the press is there. He looked at the bodies scattered around the warehouse. This is going to get messy. It already is, May said. Fair point. Morrison gestured to his marshals. Get them somewhere safe, somewhere Hale's people can't reach. They were taken to a fortified building on the edge of town, former military barracks, now used for witness protection. Guards at every entrance, no windows on the lower floors. Kane and his men took up positions on the roof. Colt finally let himself breathe. They'd survived. Again. Against odds that should have killed them twice over. And in 3 days, they'd have their chance. Their hearing, their moment to make the truth matter. If they lived that long. The 3 days passed like waiting for an execution. Thomas Garrett arrived the morning after the warehouse incident, carrying a leather case stuffed with legal documents and the grim determination of a man who'd taken on worse odds. He was younger than Colt expected, maybe 40, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. He set up in the barracks' makeshift conference room and got to work immediately. First thing you need to understand, Garrett said, spreading the documents across the table, is that we're not just fighting Hale. We're fighting an entire system designed to protect men like him. The military, the territorial government, federal officials who signed off on these operations. They all have a vested interest in making this go away. So what's our strategy? May asked. Overwhelming evidence, testimony from credible witnesses, and public pressure that makes a cover-up politically impossible. Garrett tapped the journal. This is our foundation. Hale's own words, documenting the massacre. But we need corroboration, people who were there who can verify what happened. Most of them are dead, Colt said. Not all. We have Kane and the other TC-7 survivors. They can testify to the orders they received, the mission parameters, what they witnessed. Garrett pulled out a notepad. And we need survivors from Stonefall itself, the 72 who escaped. We find them, get their testimony, build a case that can't be dismissed. That's a lot to do in 3 days, May said, which is why we start now. Garrett looked at Kane, who stood by the door. Your men, can they track down the survivors? Kane nodded slowly. Vorn kept records. Names, last known locations. Most of them scattered after Stonefall. Changed identities, tried to disappear, but we can find them. Do it. Get as many as you can to Santa Fe before the hearing. We need them on record, under oath, telling their stories. And if they don't want to come? Kane asked. If they'd rather stay buried? Then we respect that. But we ask. Garrett's expression softened slightly. These people lost everything, homes, families, their entire lives. The least we can do is give them a choice, stay silent or be heard. Kane left to coordinate with his men. Garrett turned back to May and Colt. Now for you two. You'll testify about everything. Vorn coming to the forge, the documents you found, the confrontation at the gala. You'll be cross-examined aggressively. Hale's lawyers will try to discredit you, paint you as criminals with an agenda. We are criminals, Colt pointed out. We stole evidence, fled federal custody, shot at government agents. In pursuit of exposing a massacre, context matters. Garrett made notes. But yes, they'll use it against you. So we don't hide it. We own it. You saw injustice and you acted. Sometimes the law fails people, and when it does, ordinary citizens have to step up. May leaned back in her chair. You really think we can win this? Garrett was quiet for a moment. Win is a complicated word. Legally? Maybe. Hale's guilty. The evidence proves it. But proving it and getting justice aren't the same thing. Powerful men have powerful friends. Even if we convict Hale, the people above him might walk. The system that enabled Stonefall might survive intact. Then what's the point? Colt asked, frustration bleeding into his voice. The point is, we make them see it. We force them to confront what was done in their name, with their authority, using their resources. We put faces to the numbers, names to the victims, and we make damn sure that everyone, from the territorial governor to the farmer in the field, knows what happened. Garrett met Colt's eyes. That's not a legal victory, but it's a moral one. And sometimes that's all you get. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Garrett drilled May and Colt on their testimony, anticipating questions, shoring up weaknesses in their story. Kane's men fanned out across the territory, tracking down Stonefall survivors. Some came willingly. Others took convincing. A few refused entirely, too traumatized or too afraid to relive what they'd lost. By the evening before the hearing, they had 11 survivors willing to testify. 11 out of 72. It wasn't everyone, but it was enough. Colt met them in the barracks common room. They ranged in age from late 40s to early 70s, people who'd been young when Stonefall burned, who'd spent the decades since trying to rebuild shattered lives. Some had families now. Others lived alone, still haunted by ghosts only they could see. An older woman approached Colt. She had white hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that had seen too much. "You're the gunsmith," she said. "Yes, ma'am. Sarah Brennan. I was 10 when they came." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "My parents died in the first volley. My brother got us out, me and my little sister. We ran for 3 days straight." Colt didn't know what to say. What words could possibly address that kind of loss? "I'm sorry," he managed. Sarah waved it off. "Sorry doesn't change anything. But this?" She gestured at the room, the survivors, the preparations. "This might. My parents died nameless, erased. Tomorrow I get to say their names, say what happened, make sure people remember." "We'll make sure they listen," Colt promised. "See that you do. Because if we go through this and nothing changes," Sarah's expression hardened, "then we've just torn open old wounds for nothing, and some of us can't survive that twice." The weight of it settled on Colt's shoulders. It wasn't just about exposing Hale anymore. It was about honoring the dead, validating the survivors, ensuring that pain wasn't wasted. And if they failed, if the hearing collapsed, if Hale walked free, if the system protected its own, these people would be destroyed all over again. No pressure. May found him later, sitting outside on the barracks steps, staring at the stars. She sat down beside him without speaking. They'd developed a rhythm over the past weeks, comfortable silences, understanding that didn't need words. "You holding up?" she asked eventually. "Not really. You?" "Same." May pulled out her father's badge, turned it over in her hands. "I keep thinking, what if we lose? What if all of this was for nothing? Garrett says even if we lose legally, we still win morally." Garrett's an optimist. May pocketed the badge. "My father fought this fight, and it killed him. Vorn fought it and died in a burning church. We might be next." "Probably. And you're still going through with it." "Are you?" Colt asked. May smiled, tired, genuine. "Yeah, I am. Because what's the alternative? Go back to pretending it never happened? Let Hale die peacefully in his bed, honored and respected?" She shook her head. "I'd rather die fighting than live with that." "Your father would be proud." "My father would tell me I'm an idiot, but he'd be proud anyway." May stood, stretched. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be brutal." Colt tried, but sleep wouldn't come. He lay in the narrow cot, listening to the sounds of the barracks, guards changing shifts, Kane's men on the roof, survivors whispering in adjacent rooms, all of them waiting for morning, all of them carrying pieces of the truth. Somewhere in Santa Fe, Hale was waiting too. Probably in a cell, probably furious, probably plotting. Men like him didn't go quietly. Even defeated, even exposed, they fought. And they had resources Colt couldn't imagine. But they also had something Colt's side didn't. Guilt. Maybe buried deep, maybe rationalized away, but there nonetheless. You didn't document a massacre in careful detail unless part of you knew it was wrong. You didn't spend 30 years covering it up unless you feared judgment. Hale knew what he'd done. And tomorrow, everyone else would too. Dawn broke cold and clear. Colt dressed in the only clean clothes he had, pants and a shirt Garrett had provided, worn but respectable. May wore a simple dress, her marshal's badge pinned prominently over her heart. The survivors assembled quietly, their faces set with determination and dread. The courthouse was 3 blocks away. Morrison had arranged an escort, territorial marshals front and back, Kane's men on the rooftops, watching for threats. They walked through streets lined with people. Word had spread. The trial of Colonel Adrian Hale, war hero and accused mass murderer. Everyone wanted to see. Some faces in the crowd were hostile, others curious. A few showed sympathy, but they all watched, and that was what mattered. Witnesses. People who couldn't claim ignorance afterward. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the front rows, pencils poised over notebooks. Territorial officials occupied the gallery, and at the defense table sat Hale, flanked by 3 expensive lawyers in tailored suits. He looked composed, almost serene, like this was an inconvenience rather than a reckoning. Morrison took the bench, gavelled for silence. This hearing will determine whether sufficient evidence exists to charge Colonel Adrian Hale with multiple counts of murder, conspiracy, and crimes against civilians. The territory will present its case. The defense will respond. At the conclusion, I will rule on whether this proceeds to full trial. He looked at Garrett. Counselor, you may begin. Garrett stood. Your Honor, the territory will demonstrate through documentary evidence, eyewitness testimony, and the defendant's own written confession that in October 1894, Colonel Hale commanded a covert military operation that resulted in the massacre of 228 civilians in the settlement of Stonefall. We will further show that this operation was part of a systematic pattern of government-sanctioned violence against citizens who refused to cede land to federal interests. Hale's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Whitmore, rose immediately. Objection! This hearing concerns one specific incident, not a pattern of alleged misconduct. The prosecution is attempting to bias these proceedings with inflammatory and irrelevant claims. Sustained, Morrison said. Confine your opening to Stonefall, Mr. Garrett. Garrett nodded. Very well. We will prove that Colonel Hale ordered, planned, and executed the Stonefall massacre, and we will prove it using his own words. He held up the journal. The hearing lasted 3 days. Garrett presented the documents first, the journal, the photographs, the kill list, the orders bearing Hale's signature. Whitmore objected repeatedly, challenging authenticity, chain of custody, admissibility. Morrison overruled most objections, but sustained enough to keep the defense engaged. Then came the testimony. Kane took the stand first, describing TC-7's mission parameters, the orders they received, the operation itself. He spoke in flat, clipped sentences, a soldier reporting facts, but his hand shook when he described watching families being killed. Did you participate in the killings? Whitmore asked on cross-examination. Yes. So you're a murderer testifying against your commanding officer to save yourself. I'm a murderer testifying because I'm tired of lying about it. Kane's eyes burned. Colonel Hale gave the orders. I followed them. We both have blood on our hands. But he spent 30 years pretending his are clean. One by one, the other TC-7 survivors testified. Their stories varied in details but aligned on essentials. Orders to eliminate Stonefall, minimal resistance, systematic killing. Whitmore hammered each of them on cross, pointing out inconsistencies, questioning their motives, suggesting they were coordinating lies. But the journal corroborated everything. Hale's own words, matching the testimonies beat for beat. Then came the Stonefall survivors. Sarah Brennan testified first. She described the morning the soldiers came, the sound of gunfire, her mother's screams as bullets tore through their house. She described running, hiding, watching from the hills as her home burned. How old were you? Garrett asked gently. 10 years old. And you watched your parents die. I watched soldiers kill my parents. Sarah's voice didn't waver. On orders from that man. She pointed at Hale. Whitmore tried to shake her on cross, suggesting her memories were unreliable, that trauma distorted recollection, that she couldn't possibly identify Hale after 3 decades. I remember his voice, Sarah said. He rode through the settlement before the attack, telling everyone to gather in the square. He said we'd be relocated, safe passage, and we believed him. Her hands clenched. My father believed him, and it got him killed. Other survivors followed, each one adding another piece, another name, another moment of horror. The courtroom grew quieter with each testimony. Even the hostile faces in the crowd began to shift. On the 3rd day, Garrett called May to the stand. She testified about her father's investigation, his obsession with Stonefall, the fire that destroyed his evidence. She testified about tracking Vorn, about the rifle, about the confrontation at the gala. Why didn't you go through proper channels? Whitmore demanded. Why this dramatic public accusation instead of quietly presenting evidence to authorities? Because proper channels don't work when the system's protecting the guilty, May said. My father tried proper channels. They shut him down, destroyed his work, nearly killed him. I wasn't going to make the same mistake. So you took the law into your own hands. I took the truth into my hands. The law can decide what to do with it. Finally, Garrett called Colt. He testified about Vorn coming to the forge, about recognizing the serial number, about the federal agents who arrived. He testified about fleeing with May, finding the documents, watching Stonefall burn. Mr. Mercer, Whitmore said on cross-examination, you're a simple gunsmith. No legal training, no investigative experience. What made you think you were qualified to pursue this matter? I didn't think I was qualified, Colt said. I just thought someone needed to do it. Even if it meant breaking the law, stealing evidence, endangering lives. Even then, Colt met Whitmore's eyes. Because some things matter more than staying safe. And the truth about what happened at Stonefall, that matters. Convenient philosophy for a criminal. Maybe. But I can sleep at night. Can Colonel Hale? The courtroom erupted. Morrison gavelled for order. Whitmore pivoted, trying to recover, but the damage was done. Then came the moment everyone had waited for. The defense calls Colonel Adrian Hale, Whitmore announced. Hale took the stand with military bearing, shoulders back, chin up. He swore his oath and sat, looking more like a commander addressing troops than a defendant facing judgment. Whitmore led him through a careful narrative. Distinguished service, difficult decisions, impossible circumstances. He framed Stonefall as a tragic but necessary military action, authorized at the highest levels, carried out professionally. The orders came from Washington, Hale said. The settlement was harboring fugitives, threatening territorial security. We were directed to neutralize the threat. And you followed orders, Whitmore said. I followed orders, even though those orders were difficult, morally complex. A soldier doesn't have the luxury of debating orders, Hale said. We execute the mission. We trust our commanders to make the right call. It was a good performance, calculated, sympathetic, deflecting responsibility upward while maintaining the dignity of a man who'd served honorably. Some faces in the crowd nodded along. Then Garrett stood for cross-examination. Colonel Hale, you testified that Stonefall was harboring fugitives. Can you name them? Hale hesitated fractionally. The intelligence was classified. 3 decades later, it's still classified? I don't have access to the original reports. Convenient. Garrett pulled out the journal. But you do have access to this. Your journal, your words. Let me read a passage. Civilians attempted negotiation, command ordered full suppression. Did you write that? The journal's context is, did you write it? Yes. So civilians tried to negotiate, not fight, not resist, negotiate. And your response was full suppression. Garrett's voice cut like a blade. Is that how you handle fugitives? By killing everyone in the settlement? It was a military decision made in... A military decision to kill children? Garrett flipped pages. Here's another entry. Casualties include 23 minors. 23 children, Colonel. Did they threaten territorial security? Hale's composure cracked. War is ugly. Civilians die. It's a tragedy, but this wasn't war. This was a massacre. Garrett held up the kill list. You documented every victim. Checked them off like inventory. Sarah Brennan, age 10. Thomas Brennan, age 41. Catherine Brennan, age 37. You knew their names, knew their ages, and you killed them anyway. I followed orders. Orders you didn't question, didn't verify, didn't refuse. Garrett leaned forward. You testified that soldiers don't debate orders, but one of your men did. Elias Vorn saw what was happening and he refused. He sabotaged the mission, saved 72 lives. So clearly, refusing was an option. Vorn was a deserter, a traitor. Vorn had a conscience. You had orders, and you chose orders over humanity. Garrett's voice dropped, quiet and devastating. How many settlements, Colonel? You documented 4 others in your journal. How many times did you do this? Whitmore objected. Morrison sustained it, but the question hung in the air, unanswered and damning. Garrett stepped back. No further questions. The courtroom was silent. Hale sat rigid, his mask finally shattered, fury and something darker. Maybe shame, maybe fear, flickering across his face. Morrison called for closing arguments. Whitmore tried to salvage it, arguing military necessity, fog of war, the complexity of frontier operations. But his words felt hollow now, empty justifications for the unjustifiable. Garrett stood, He didn't shout, didn't gesticulate, he just spoke, simple and direct. Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. The defendant documented his crimes. Witnesses, both his own men and the survivors, corroborate those documents. The only question is whether we have the courage to hold a powerful man accountable for what he did to powerless people. Garrett looked at the gallery, at the journalists, at the faces watching. Stonefall was erased once. Don't let it be erased again. Morrison adjourned for deliberation. 2 hours later, he returned. The courtroom packed tighter, every seat filled, people standing in the aisles. Morrison took the bench, his expression grave. I've reviewed the evidence, he said. Documentary, photographic, and testimonial. I've considered the defense's arguments regarding military authority and operational necessity. He paused. And I find that sufficient evidence exists to charge Colonel Adrian Hale with 228 counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and crimes against civilian populations. This matter will proceed to full trial. The courtroom exploded. Cheers from some quarters, outrage from others. Journalists rushed for the exits to file their stories. Hale sat frozen, his attorneys already arguing motions, demanding bail, filing appeals. Morrison gavelled for order. Colonel Hale will be remanded to territorial custody pending trial. Bail is denied given flight risk and the severity of charges. He looked at May and Colt. The witnesses in this matter will remain under court protection. Anyone who interferes with them or this trial will face contempt charges. Guards led Hale away. He walked stiffly, mechanically, a man watching his carefully constructed legacy collapse. As he passed Colt, their eyes met. For just a moment, Hale looked human, tired, defeated, maybe even regretful. Then the mask came back. He straightened his shoulders and walked out with military dignity and tact. But everyone had seen. Everyone knew. The ghost of Stonefall had finally found its voice. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Garrett fielded questions, keeping May and Colt behind him. Kane and his men formed a protective barrier, ensuring nobody got too close.
How does it feel to have won? One journalist called. We haven't won, May said. We've just forced them to acknowledge the question. The trial will determine if we get justice. What do you say to people who claim this is politically motivated? I'd say 228 corpses aren't political. They're human beings who deserve to live. May's voice carried across the crowd. And if holding their killer accountable is political, then politics needs to change.
More questions followed, but Garrett pulled them away. They retreated to the barracks under escort, exhausted and wired, unable to process what had just happened. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, against a system designed to protect its own, they'd forced the truth into the light. And now came the hard part, keeping it there. The trial began 6 weeks later on a Tuesday morning that felt too ordinary for what was about to unfold. Colt stood outside the courthouse watching people file in. Journalists from as far as New York, territorial officials, curiosity seekers, and those few who'd traveled hundreds of miles because someone they loved had died at Stonefall. The crowd had grown since the preliminary hearing. What started as local scandal had become national news. Newspapers across the country ran headlines about the decorated war hero accused of massacring civilians, about the government conspiracy, about the rifle that shouldn't exist. Some papers called Hale a monster. Others defended him as a soldier following orders. A few questioned whether the whole thing was fabricated, a conspiracy theory given too much credence, but they all talked about it, and that, May had said, was half the battle. You ready? She asked, appearing beside him. Colt thought about lying, saying yes, pretending he had the stomach for what came next. Instead, he said, No. You? Not even close. May adjusted her marshal's badge. She wore it every day now, polished until it shone. Her father's badge, a reminder of why they were here. But I stopped waiting to be ready weeks ago. Now I'm just going through the motions and hoping they add up to something. They walked inside together. The courtroom was packed tighter than before. Every seat claimed, people standing along the walls. The jury box held 12 men, ranchers, merchants, a banker, a schoolteacher. Ordinary people being asked to judge extraordinary crimes. Hale sat at the defense table flanked by Whitmore and 2 other attorneys. He'd aged in the weeks since the preliminary hearing, the lines in his face deeper, his posture less certain. But his eyes still carried that military hardness, the conviction that he'd done what was necessary and history would vindicate him. Maybe it would. Maybe in 50 years, people would see Stonefall as just another casualty of westward expansion, unfortunate but inevitable. Or maybe they'd see it for what it was, murder dressed up in orders and sealed with official stamps. The trial would decide which story stuck. Morrison entered. Everyone rose. The ritual of justice playing out in its prescribed forms, as if following procedure could somehow contain what they were about to examine. "The Territory versus Colonel Adrian Hale," Morrison announced. "Opening statements." Garrett stood. He'd lost weight over the past weeks, driven by the kind of obsession Colt recognized from May's description of her father. This case had consumed him. Not for glory or career advancement, Garrett had made clear he expected this trial to end his legal practice in the Territory. Too many powerful people wanted Hale protected, but he kept going anyway, propelled by the same stubborn sense that some things mattered more than safety. "Members of the jury," Garrett began, "over the next weeks you will hear testimony that challenges everything you believe about honor, duty, and service. You will hear about soldiers who killed civilians, about orders that violated every principle of military conduct, about a government that covered up mass murder to protect its own interests." He paused, letting the words settle. "And you will have to decide, does power excuse evil? Do orders absolve conscience? Or are there lines that cannot be crossed, regardless of who gives the command?" Whitmore's opening countered with military precision. Hale was a soldier, Stonefall was a lawful operation. The tragedy was regrettable but authorized at the highest levels. He painted Hale as a scapegoat, a convenient target for people who wanted to blame someone for the ugly realities of frontier expansion. "Colonel Hale followed orders," Whitmore said. "Orders from superior officers, approved by federal authorities, executed within the bounds of military law. If you convict him, you're not convicting a criminal. You're convicting a soldier for doing his duty." The arguments were familiar, worn smooth by repetition during the preliminary hearing, but they landed differently with a jury. Colt watched the 12 faces, trying to read which way they leaned. Some looked sympathetic to Hale, others disgusted. Most just looked overwhelmed. The testimony began the same way it had before. Documents, photographs, witnesses establishing the basic facts. But Garrett had refined his approach, streamlining the evidence, cutting anything that didn't directly support the core narrative. Stonefall existed. The military destroyed it. Hale gave the orders. Kane testified again, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was admitting. "We were told the settlement harbored fugitives, that they'd refused federal authority. That force was authorized to remove the threat." He looked at the jury. None of that was true. They were farmers, families, people trying to live. And we killed them because we were ordered to. Whitmore hammered him on cross. "You're testifying to save yourself from prosecution, aren't you?" "No, sir. You participated in these alleged crimes. By your own admission, you killed civilians." "Yes, sir." "So why should this jury believe anything you say?" Kane was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 30 years. "Because I've spent 3 decades lying about it, lying to myself, to others, about what we did and why. And I'm tired. Tired of pretending orders made it right. Tired of watching the men who gave those orders live honored lives, while the people we killed stay forgotten." He met Whitmore's eyes. "I'm guilty. I know that. But so is Colonel Hale. And at least one of us should answer for it." The Stonefall survivors testified next, each one adding another layer of horror. But Garrett had chosen them carefully this time, not just for their stories, but for their credibility. Sarah Brennan returned, but now she was joined by a former schoolteacher who documented everything she remembered, a rancher whose detailed knowledge of the settlement's layout corroborated the military reports, a woman who'd kept her daughter's torn dress for 30 years as evidence of the violence. Each testimony chipped away at Whitmore's narrative of lawful military action. You couldn't hear these stories, these specific, personal, devastating accounts, and maintain that Stonefall was anything but murder. On the 8th day of trial, Garrett called a witness that surprised everyone. The Territory calls Brigadier General Samuel Hayes, retired. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Hayes was military aristocracy, West Point graduate, decorated veteran, respected advisor to 3 territorial governors. He walked to the stand with the bearing of a man used to authority, sworn his oath, and sat. "General Hayes," Garrett said, "you served in the Army for 35 years, correct?" "That's correct." And during that time, you held various command positions overseeing frontier operations. Yes. Are you familiar with ghost companies? Hayes's expression tightened fractionally. I've heard the term. These were covert units that operated without official recognition, correct? Units like TC-7. Objection, Whitmore said. Relevance. I'm establishing context for the defendant's chain of command, Garrett said. Overruled, Morrison said. Answer the question, General. Hayes looked uncomfortable. There were certain operations that required discretion, units that operated under classified parameters. Did you ever command such units? I was aware of them. Did you ever give orders to ghost companies? A long pause. On occasion, Garrett pulled out a document. Is this your signature? Hayes examined it. His face went pale. Where did you get this? Is it your signature? Yes, but this is a deployment order for TC-7, dated September 1894. It authorizes the unit to neutralize resistance in designated settlements by any means necessary. You signed it. The courtroom erupted. Morrison gavelled for order. Hayes looked like he'd been struck. That was a classified operation, Hayes said. You have no authority to— I have every authority when it concerns mass murder, Garrett interrupted. You ordered the Stonefall operation. You gave Colonel Hale his mission parameters. You authorized the massacre. I authorized a military action against a hostile settlement. Hostile how? They were farmers. They had no weapons, no military capability. Their only crime was refusing to sell land the government wanted. Hayes's composure shattered. You don't understand the pressures we faced. Washington wanted results, wanted the territories pacified, secured. They didn't care how we did it, just that it got done. So yes, I signed orders. Yes, I authorized operations that— He stopped, realizing what he was admitting. Garrett let the silence stretch. Then, quietly, operations that resulted in how many civilian deaths, General? Hayes didn't answer. How many settlements did you erase? I want immunity, Hayes said suddenly, looking at Morrison. I'll testify fully, provide documentation, name everyone involved. But I want immunity from prosecution. The courtroom exploded again. Whitmore was on his feet, objecting furiously. Garrett argued back. Morrison called for order, but the chaos had taken on a life of its own. Finally, Morrison made a decision. General Hayes, this court cannot grant immunity. However, your cooperation will be noted in any subsequent proceedings. He looked at Garrett. Continue. Over the next 3 hours, Hayes dismantled the entire cover-up. He named names, colonels, generals, territorial officials, federal bureaucrats. He described the system, identify desired land, manufacture justification for military action, deploy ghost companies, erase any evidence afterward. He estimated that between 1885 and 1895, at least 15 settlements had been eliminated this way, maybe more. And Colonel Hale, Garrett asked, was one of our most effective commanders, followed orders without question, kept operations clean, never left evidence. Until Vaughan. Hayes's expression darkened. Elias Vaughan was the only soldier who ever refused, the only one who chose conscience over duty, and we tried to bury him for it. Why are you testifying now? Garrett asked, after years of silence. Hayes looked at Hale, then at the jury, then at the survivors sitting in the gallery. Because I'm dying, cancer. 6 months, maybe less. And I've spent 30 years watching men like Hale collect honors while people like Vaughan die in the shadows. Maybe this doesn't change anything. Maybe I hang for it. But at least the truth will be on record. At least the dead will have names. He stepped down. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Whitmore tried to salvage the defense, arguing that Hayes's testimony proved Hale was just following orders from above, that convicting him was scapegoating. But the argument rang hollow now. Everyone had seen Hayes admit to the conspiracy. Everyone had heard him describe the system, and that system included Hale. On the 14th day, Hale took the stand again. Garrett's cross-examination was surgical. He used Hayes's testimony to corner Hale, forcing him to admit he'd known the intelligence about Stonefall was fabricated, that he'd questioned the orders but followed them anyway, that he'd documented everything because part of him knew it was wrong. You could have refused, Garrett said. I was a soldier. Vaughan was a soldier. He refused. Vorn was a deserter. Vorn saved 72 lives. How many did you save, Colonel? Hale had no answer. You testified that you followed orders. But orders don't absolve you. You made choices. You chose to believe convenient lies about fugitives rather than verify the truth. You chose to kill civilians rather than report your suspicions. You chose to cover it up rather than face consequences. Garrett's voice dropped. You chose, Colonel, every step of the way, and 228 people died because of those choices. I did my duty. Hale's composure finally broke completely. I served my country. I followed orders from superior officers. What was I supposed to do? Refuse and be court-martialed? Throw away my career, my honor, my life? Yes, Garrett said simply. That's exactly what you were supposed to do, because some things matter more than careers, and human life is one of them. Hale sat there, exposed and defeated, everything he'd built over a lifetime crumbling. When he stepped down, he looked smaller somehow. Less the decorated colonel, more just a tired old man who'd made terrible choices and run out of places to hide from them. Closing arguments came on day 16. Whitmore did his best, arguing military necessity, superior orders, the fog of war. But his heart wasn't in it anymore. The evidence was too overwhelming, the testimony too damning. Garrett stood for the final time. Members of the jury, you've heard testimony that's difficult to process. Soldiers killing children, generals ordering massacres, a government covering up mass murder. It challenges everything we want to believe about our country, our military, our institutions. He paused. And that's precisely why your verdict matters. Because if we excuse this, if we say orders made it acceptable, authority made it legal, service made it honorable, then we're saying there are no lines, no limits. That power excuses anything. He gestured to the survivors in the gallery. These people had their lives destroyed, families murdered, homes burned, histories erased. And for 30 years, no one cared, no one asked questions, no one demanded justice. Because it was easier to look away, easier to trust that men in uniforms and official positions were doing the right thing. Garrett's voice hardened. But Elias Vorn didn't look away. He saw what was happening, and he refused to be part of it. He chose conscience over orders, humanity over duty. And it cost him everything, his career, his identity, his life. But he saved 72 people, and before he died, he made sure the truth would finally come out. He turned to the jury. Colonel Hale had the same choice, the same opportunity to refuse. He chose differently. And that choice, that's what you're judging. Not whether he followed orders, but whether following those orders made him innocent. Garrett paused. I think you know the answer. The question is, do you have the courage to say it out loud? The jury deliberated for 3 days. Colt spent that time in the barracks, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything except 12 people deciding whether 30 years of fighting had meant something. May paced constantly. Kane and his men maintained their watch positions, but the tension bled through everything they did. On the afternoon of the third day, word came. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom packed even tighter than before. Colt found himself squeezed between May and Sarah Brennan, all of them holding their breath as the jury filed in. Their faces gave nothing away. Has the jury reached a verdict? Morrison asked. The foreman stood, a rancher named Thomas Wells, weathered and serious. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of murder in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. The word hit like a gunshot. Someone in the gallery gasped. Someone else started crying. Colt felt May's hand find his, squeezing tight. Morrison continued through all 228 counts. Each time, the same answer, guilty. When it was done, Morrison addressed Hale. Colonel Adrian Hale, you have been found guilty of 228 counts of murder. Before I pass sentence, do you have anything to say? Hale stood slowly. For a long moment, he just looked at the courtroom, at the survivors, at the jury, at the journalists recording every word. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, stripped of the military authority that had carried him through the trial. I followed orders, he said. I've said that throughout this trial, and I still believe it. But I've come to understand that's not enough. Orders don't make murder acceptable. Service doesn't excuse cruelty. I told myself I was a soldier doing his duty, but what I was... He stopped, his voice breaking. What I was a man who chose his career over innocent lives, who chose obedience over humanity. And I'll die knowing that. Knowing that every honor I ever earned is built on the bones of people who deserve to live. He sat down. The courtroom was silent. Morrison delivered the sentence. The crimes you committed are among the gravest this court has ever examined. Your abuse of authority, your systematic elimination of civilians, and your decades-long cover-up demonstrate a profound moral failure. I hereby sentence you to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. May you spend your remaining years contemplating the weight of what you've done. Guards led Hale away. He didn't look back. The trial was over. Justice, in its legal sense, had been served. But Colt felt strangely empty. Hale would die in prison, yes. Hayes and the other conspirators would face their own trials. The cover-up was exposed. But none of that brought back the dead. None of it gave the survivors their stolen lives back. Outside the courthouse, reporters mobbed them again. Garrett fielded most questions, but eventually they pushed through to May. How does it feel to have won? Someone asked. May looked at Sarah Brennan standing nearby with tears streaming down her face. Looked at the other survivors, clutching each other, some crying, some staring into space like they couldn't quite believe it was real. Ask me in 30 years, May said quietly. When enough time has passed that we know if this actually changed anything. They made their way back to the barracks through crowds that felt different now, less curious, more uncertain. The trial had shaken something loose in the territory's foundation. People who'd trusted the government, the military, the official narratives. Now they questioned. And that questioning was spreading. Newspapers ran follow-up stories. Other settlements came forward with suspicions about relatives who'd disappeared, communities that had vanished. Congress announced investigations. The territorial governor called for a review of all military operations from the past 20 years. Change was coming. Slow, incomplete, frustrating change. But change nonetheless. 2 months after the trial, a memorial commission was established. They would travel to Stonefall, document the site, build a monument with every victim's name. Sarah Brennan was appointed to lead it. She asked May and Colt to join. They rode out to Stonefall in early spring. The ruins looked different now, not haunted so much as quiet. Waiting. The commission had brought surveyors, architects, stonemasons. They walked the settlement, marking where buildings had stood, identifying the collapsed church where Vorn had died. The monument will go here, Sarah said, pointing to the town square. Right where Hale told everyone to gather. Right where he lied to my father. The design was simple, a granite wall with names carved in neat rows. 228 victims. 72 survivors. And at the bottom, a single line. They were not forgotten. What about Vorn? Colt asked. He deserves to be remembered too. Sarah considered. He wasn't from Stonefall, but he died trying to make this right. She looked at May. What do you think? Separate Stone, May said, near the church. Not a victim, but not forgotten either. Just a man who chose differently. They agreed. A smaller monument would mark where Vorn died, with his name and dates and a simple inscription. He refused. The construction took 6 months. Colt stayed in Santa Fe, helping Garrett tie up legal loose ends, testifying at the trials of Hayes and other conspirators. May returned to her marshal duties, tracking down the remaining Stonefall survivors, documenting their stories, making sure each one had a place in the historical record. Kane and his men scattered again, but this time they weren't hiding. They testified at trials, gave interviews to journalists, spoke publicly about what they'd done and why. Some faced prosecution. Others were granted immunity in exchange for testimony. All of them carried the weight of Stonefall for the rest of their lives. The monument was dedicated on a cold October morning, exactly 31 years after the massacre. Hundreds attended. Survivors, their families, journalists, officials, curious onlookers. Even Morrison came, his judicial robes traded for a simple suit. Sarah Brennan gave the dedication speech. She spoke about her parents, her siblings, the life she'd lost, spoke about 30 years of silence, of being told to move on, to forget, to accept that some things couldn't be changed. But they can be changed, she said, not undone. We can't bring back the dead, but acknowledged, honored, given the recognition they deserved in life but were denied in death. She gestured to the monument, names gleaming in the morning light. These people mattered. They lived. They died. And now, finally, they're remembered. Colt stood beside May as the ceremony continued. Speeches from officials offering apologies that felt inadequate but necessary. Prayers from clergy trying to make sense of senseless violence. Tears from people who'd waited a lifetime for this moment. When it was done, people filed past the monument, touching names, leaving flowers, whispering goodbyes to relatives they'd lost 3 decades before. May walked to her aunt's name, traced the letters with her fingers. Maria Sutton, age 28. She looked at Colt. My father spent his life trying to get here, trying to make people see. He did see, Colt said. He just didn't live long enough to watch it happen. No, but he started it. Him and Vorn and everyone else who refused to let this stay buried. May's hand found the badge on her chest, her father's badge. That matters. Maybe more than the ending. They walked to Vorn's smaller monument together. The stone was simple, unadorned except for the inscription. He refused. You think he knew it would end this way? May asked. I think he hoped, but I don't think he knew. Colt thought about Vorn walking into his forge, calm and certain, carrying a rifle that would bring everything down. I think he just decided it was worth trying. Win or lose, it was worth making the attempt. And if we'd lost, if Hale had walked free, then someone else would have tried. Someday. Someone who read about us in the papers, who heard the story, who decided they couldn't live with the silence. Colt looked at the monument, at the names, at the people gathered to remember. Truth is like that. You can bury it, but it keeps growing. Eventually it breaks through. May smiled, sad but genuine. My father would have liked you. Your father would have thought I was an idiot for getting involved. That too. But he would have liked you anyway. They stayed until the crowd dispersed, until it was just them and the monuments and the quiet canyon wind. Then they walked back to their horses, leaving Stonefall to its ghosts. Except now the ghosts had names, had recognition, had a place in history that couldn't be erased. Colt returned to Redemption a week later. His forge had been shuttered for months, his tools gathering dust. Part of him wondered if he could just pick up where he'd left off, go back to fixing guns and minding his business. But standing in the doorway, looking at the workbench where Vorn had set down that rusted rifle, he knew that life was gone. He'd changed too much, seen too much. He sold the forge, used the money to buy a small house in Santa Fe, near the courthouse where he'd testified. Started working as an investigator for Garrett's law practice, tracking down evidence, interviewing witnesses, building cases for people who couldn't afford fancy lawyers. It wasn't smithing, but it was work that mattered, work that helped people who needed help. And somehow, that felt right. May stayed a marshal, but she shifted her focus. She started investigating other disappearances, other suspicious incidents where settlements had vanished or communities had been erased. Some cases led nowhere. Others uncovered cover-ups similar to Stonefall. Each one she documented, built cases for, pushed until someone in authority had to acknowledge it. She became known for it, the marshal who wouldn't let things go, who dug until she found truth. Some officials hated her. Others respected her. She didn't much care either way. 5 years after the trial, she and Colt attended the dedication of a second monument, this one in the territorial capital, listing all 15 settlements that had been eliminated by ghost companies. The governor gave a speech about learning from history, about ensuring it never happened again. Standard political rhetoric that probably meant nothing. But the monument existed, the names were carved in stone, and people would walk past it, read it, ask questions. That was something. You think we made a difference? Colt asked as they stood before the new monument. May considered. We made people see. Whether that changes anything. She shrugged. Hale's in prison. Hayes is dead. The ghost companies are disbanded, but the system that created them? That's still there. Different names, different justifications, but the same basic machinery. So it was pointless. No. Just incomplete. May looked at him. We proved it could be done. We showed that ordinary people, a gunsmith and a marshal, could take on the government and win. Not completely, not perfectly, but win nonetheless. And the people who died? They're remembered now. Not forgotten, not erased. That doesn't bring them back. Doesn't undo the harm. But it means something to their families, to survivors, to anyone who needs to believe that truth eventually surfaces. They stood together in the fading light. Two people who'd stumbled into something bigger than themselves and somehow survived. Around them, the city moved on, people heading home, shops closing, the ordinary rhythm of life continuing regardless of monuments or trials or justice delayed by decades. And maybe that was the point. Life continued. The dead were mourned, but not forgotten. The truth was exposed, but not always acted on. Change happened slowly, imperfectly, frustratingly. But it happened. Because people like Vorn refused. People like May and her father kept digging. People like Colt chose to follow a stranger into danger rather than look away. The rifle that shouldn't exist had brought them here. The man they tried to erase had given them purpose. And together, they'd done what everyone said was impossible. They'd made the powerful answer for their crimes. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to remember. Enough to prove that silence could be broken and ghosts could speak, and truth, however long buried, could find its way to light. Somewhere in that truth, Elias Vorn's sacrifice meant something. The victims of Stonefall were honored, and the line that Hale had crossed, the line that said some things were acceptable in service to power, that line was redrawn. Not permanently, not for everyone, but for now, for this moment. And sometimes that was all you got. Sometimes that had to be enough.